G'day mates, it's the Doctor here. A few months ago I made a video on the topic of James's character arc in the hit era compared to the books. But there was a lot I wanted to say that had to be cut because it didn't jive with the structure of the video, or I was burnt out. This time we are going all the way. Today we're going to be looking at 4 episodes from the hit era and how they culminate into what is possibly the greatest story from this generation of the show. Like a custom-made Railway series book. If it were to be given a title going by the way the publishers wanted to market the books, it would probably be called Thomas James of the Trucks. Or we can go with the more creative title, Ruckus with the Trucks.
Nice.
If anyone out there plans on covering James the Red Engine or the hit era in general, it is important not to overlook this remarkable story with an incredible character journey that develops one of the most popular characters in a respectful manner. Quite a rare sight during this time. And say what you will how they treated the other characters, but with James, this is worth congratulating. So without getting distracted by our own self-image, let us begin. Chapter 1. James gets a new coat. Our story begins as the title suggests. James gets a new coat. But unlike the rest of the engines, James takes special pride in his red paint. The next day, the Fat Controller assigns James to meet Percy at the coaling plant. He specifically orders James no dilly-dallying, and James proceeds to do just that, as he was too distracted by his own gleaming paintwork and decides to show off to others who were doing their jobs. By the time he arrives at his job, Percy and the manager were cross. So James is ordered to take extra trucks on his journey to the harbour. Percy warns James the trucks are very troublesome today, but James takes no notice. Naturally, the trucks decide to stir up some trouble by bumping their loaded coal onto James, covering him in soot. James, feeling embarrassed, no longer wants to be seen, but after listening to the sounds around him, he learns to have a laugh at his own misfortune. I never got the impression that James is the type who can laugh at himself, so this ending feels forced to avoid the episode concluding on a sour note. But what this episode does is set up a few things. 1. As a hit era is meant to be a soft reboot, this story does explain who James is. A self-indulgent, arrogant, egotistical brat, all puffed up in his smoke box. 2. It sets up James's relationship with the trucks, and why he does not get along with them. Most importantly, this story arc starts out with James. Think about it, Boko is the protagonist of Chapter 1 in Book 28, not James. He's the one who the villain interacts with, he's the one in possession what the villain attempts to steal from, James is merely an observer. I'm glad Boko got a starring role in some form, but that would mean 2 out of the 4 stories in James of the Diesel Engines is not about James. You know, I'm starting to think this might be the worst book in the Railway series. Chapter 2. Thomas's New Trucks. The day starts out with a shipment of brand new trucks. Bill and Ben seem to be more impressed with Thomas's trucks, and James, feeling jealous, decides to challenge Thomas who can keep their trucks the cleanest. Things do not go well for Thomas, as his trucks seem to have no regard for cleanliness. His frustration reaches a tipping point, and decides to use his old trucks so the new ones can stay clean. He also remembers Edward's advice.
Just because they're old doesn't mean they're not useful.
Edward, if you're not preserved by the time I get back to Tim's sheds, I'm going to kill you! The Fat Controller rolls up in Harvey's cab, and was very cross. Thomas heads off to collect his new trucks, and brings them to the crash site to clean up the mess. This time he doesn't care if his new trucks got filthy, what matters is getting the job done. James proudly boasts he won the contest, but his trucks decide to play a trick on him by keeping him in place as Cranky's cable snaps and the crate of melons drop onto James. I really do not like the final line of this episode because it mucks up another character's purpose later on.
I think freight cars like to be useful rather than clean.
A better line for this could be, James, I think the trucks like to be dirty rather than clean. But this episode is a crucial step in James's story arc. It shows us Thomas is going to play a role in how James will grow. And I think this gives us insight to how James views the trucks. He does not see them as companions for his travels, but props to further increase his self-esteem. This comes into play later.
Hey, that was nothing. See how easily I can shunt heavy, Hector?
Though I do not like the final line, I am happy it ends on that sour note for James that should have been part of the first chapter. At least it is here. Probably because Thomas was the star of this episode, so if he is happy by the end, then there is an illusion of a happy ending. But this story isn't about Thomas. It's about James, and things are not looking well for him. Chapter 3. Hector the Horrid. With business booming manufacturing new trucks, a special one is ordered in the form of Sodor's first ever hopper car. Bill and Ben, who brought him in, explained why they have nicknamed Hector the Horrid, as he does not like to be shunted. Both Thomas and James can tell this truck is more aggressive from the ones they are used to, which will undoubtedly prove to be troublesome. Thomas later heads to the yard where the twins dropped off Hector, and it's here Thomas learns Hector has a severe case of haphophobia. Please, sir, may I ask for a hug? I recently learned my best friend is no different than James. Seriously, all I want is a new friend. Can we at least touch buffers?
Keep away!
Alright, no friends for me. Thomas comes to immediate regret of what he had just done and decides to talk things out. This is when he discovers Hector is afraid to be filled up with coal, so Thomas, in one of his most respectful acts, deliberately allows coal to fall on him, proving to Hector there is nothing to be scared of. I've mentioned before, I find redemption arcs too common throughout the show, but the reason it works with Hector is because his character arc will become influential to another character. Ever since its release, Hector the Horrid has been recognized as one of the greats of the hit era. Characters, perfect. Everyone is presented how they should be. Even Thomas. Structure, terrific. Every scene matters. Story, near perfect. As soon as Hector is introduced, there is tension throughout the episode, which builds up to possibly the best showdown between hero and villain from this generation of the show. That's another thing Hector has going for him. He is a straight up villain. Not a rival or a bully, Hector is a full-on antagonist. He's not being violent for a friendly tussle, he's not scaring others off for some funny tease. Hector is a threat to the engines, physically and psychologically. Which makes his redemption feel more gratifying. The only issue I have with this episode is this one line from the narrator that should have been cut.
Now the extra delivery would never be ready.
Problem here is the train is ready on time, so that's a bloody lie. If James wasn't present at the start of the episode, his entire arc wouldn't exist. This is a perfect chapter where the protagonist is sidelined while another story takes place without his knowledge. I think the reason this and its sequel episode work so well together is because they were written by the same person, Simon Spencer. Why does it take place in the next season and not the same as part 1 is weird, considering Madge, who was also introduced this season, has both her spotlight episodes here. I'm not sure why they delayed Hector's story arc, but it's possible Simon came up with the idea of a follow-up later. Chapter 4. James works it out. This is the one. This is a story that ties all the chapters together. James' prejudice with the trucks, how he uses them to his own benefit, Hector's story arc, Thomas watching over James, and even James's friendship with Edward. Yeah, that's another thing. The 27th episode of Season 10 marks the last time in the entire show James is rude to Edward. He shows a newfound respect for the old engine, which is on full display here. If this had taken place before Season 10, James would have this reaction to Edward's warning.
I am taking care, replied James. Taking care to finish first.
I had to go slowly and take care.
Trust a blue engine to be late.
It will be hard to shunt your train up the hill. I must have taken the wrong track, he thought.
There is so much continuity in this episode, it's hard to believe it is a Season 12 episode. If it wasn't for the Season 12 aesthetics, but I digress. What is the story? James is showing off how good he is at shunting trucks. Stanley praises James but decides to up himself by boasting he can shunt a truck as heavy as Hector. The hopper car, no longer worried about getting shunted, was more concerned about the weather as it started to snow. One criticism I have heard is that it is jarring for Hector to go from a nice truck to a suddenly wiser truck, but clearly a lot of time has passed, especially how James's destination is Great Waterton, and Great Discovery takes place between seasons 11 and 12. Now as for Hector knowing the dangers of snow, that could be a continuity error, considering he is a brand new truck. However, the episode begins with snow round the shunting yard, so it's safe to say this is not Hector's first experience with snow. Perhaps he is coming fresh off another incident, a missing story in between this and Hector the Horrid that could explain his first experience with snow involving Bill and Ben, possibly tying up his beef with the twins, which is never resolved. But for James the Red Engine, everything falls into place. Along his journey, James is warned several times about the weather getting worse, diverting onto the wrong tracks, purposely ignoring Hector's advice, which leads to his train getting stuck in a snowdrift. He has placed himself between a rock and a hard place, and it's this moment when James finally works it out. James works it out that not all trucks are alike, realizing all this time Hector was trying to help him, and to his credit, he did put up with James's stubbornness for a while. James listens to Hector's solution. Knowing his powerful size, his weight would be strong enough to biff the train right through the snow.
We did it! Well done, Hector!
If word gets out about this, Edward, that I was nice to a newcomer, let alone a truck of all people, I am going to kill you! James makes his way to Great Waterton, realizing some trucks can be trusted, and Hector is not the same truck as when he met him. This is what I mean how Hector is the best character among Hit's roster of newbies. Not only does he go through the most drastic character arc, but his story plays a role in fleshing out another character. In my opinion, James and Hector are like Duck and Diesel. You cannot talk about one without the other, and as people like to pretend season 12 doesn't exist, they often overlook this character arc and its message that is brilliantly delivered. Not every steam engine is friendly, not every diesel is hostile, not every man is a monster, not every woman is like Jamie Markey, and not every truck is troublesome. Some of them would rather be really useful. James is a competitive character. It doesn't matter if it's those beneath him, equal, or above him. He wants to outshine them all. And it had to take a situation like this for him to swallow his pride and finally mature as a character. I might be crazy, but I think the Hit era is the best portrayal of James, setting up elements that would come into play throughout its tenure, what made the Red Engine who he is, without reinventing the character that stays true to who James always was. If only the other engines were given the same splendid treatment. And that is going to be the end of the video, and the last of the Hector and James dynamic. The next Thomas topic will be one of the biggest videos ever on my channel, and it is a project I have teased in the past, so if you're excited, please like, share, subscribe, and get ready for one of the most ambitious videos you will ever see. Until next time, take care, mates!